Results out from Woolworths this morning show a 9.3% rise in turnover for the 6 months to December. But when you strip out new stores, sales were up by only 4.4%, and that's less than the rate of inflation. I went along to Woolies' results presentation this morning and I asked CEO Simon Susman whether the environment for retailers was improving following a very tough year last year.
Our sense is that it's a little easier, and in particular at the upper income profile. So it's the LSM 9 and 10 customer. If you go back 18 months, those customers were the most affected by all the uncertainty that was around. So we had the world economic crisis, we had here very high interest rates, we had at the time a lot of political uncertainty. That's settled down, interest rates have come down, fuel prices have come down. So we think that the customer at the higher end of not the top end, but the higher end of the South African income profile is more settled, a lot more confident about life, and we expect that to continue. The economy is beginning to come out of recession, so we think the future is going to be a little less tough than the past. What we don't see is a return to the excessive spending that we had 3 and 4 years ago. We don't think that's appropriate, and we don't think the money's there to do that.
Of course, there was a lot of talk last year about customers shopping down and perhaps going in at the bottom end of the market. Did that affect you at all? Did you see that in your operations?
It did affect Woolworths, but what we've done is we've done an enormous amount of work, particularly on what we call our opening price points. So these are the prices of core products like t-shirts, underwear, bras, cooking oil, rice, cornflakes, and we've been very aggressive in those prices, and we are getting very positive feedback from customers on that.
Your operating profit margins up from 6.7 to 7.5%. You say improved product margins, good cost controls. You're aiming for 8%. What's the time range for that?
We should get to that over the next year or so, and we feel we're on track to do that. The business has got a good set of strategies, and those strategies all help to build sales and to build the margin, and the two together help with build that operating margin.
Of course, we have seen food inflation starting to come down quite significantly. How does that affect your food operations?
The Woolworths food customer tends to be influenced less by inflation and more by her own disposable income.
His or her, yeah.
Mainly her. So mainly her. I know there's some very loyal hises, but mainly her. So we think that inflation for Woolies is less of an issue than it might be for the rest of the trade, who are much more linked to inflation in their growth. Confidence is more relevant to the Woolies customer, and of course the product that we offer her.
And floor space up by 5.7%. You say there's going to be less aggressive expansion going forward for the remainder of this year and into next year. Why is that?
We flew a bit too high 2 and 3 years ago. We were opening stores all over the country, and some of those have not been as profitable as we'd like them to have been. So we've slowed down the rate of expansion. We're not stopping expanding stores. We think there's a lot more opportunity in the country. And more particularly, we want to open slightly larger stores to give a better offer to our customers.
You talked about the interest rate cuts in South Africa. In Australia, it's been a different picture. They never entered recession, actually, and they've had 3 interest rate increases over the last 6 months. How's that affecting the Australian customer? The fact that they didn't go into recession, does that mean they retained confidence? And are they being affected by the interest rate rises?
The Australian fiscus last year actually gave cash back to consumers to keep the economy on the rise. That worked, but this year that money's not available. So the Australian customers now not got that extra free cash. It was literally $900 in their bank accounts if you were a taxpayer. That money's not available, and the interest rates have gone up. So we see an Australian consumer now under more pressure than she was last year. But underlying, that's a good growth economy. They'll get through their difficult times, and that business and that economy will grow.
Of course, while operating margins have improved here, they have come under pressure in Australia. Part of that's due to the start-up costs for Trenery. When would you see a normalisation of margins in Australia and Trenery, and what's happening there?
There were 2 parts to that shrinking of margin. The one was the start-up cost of Trenery, and the others we did have to discount to clear the goods as the market tightened. So we see the market staying tight for the next year, but we see Trenery doing well in both countries, in Australia and in South Africa, and we're going to expand Trenery in Australia. We've already expanded it in South Africa. So that's a good growth business for us.
And the scope for growth for Trenery, would you open standalone stores in South Africa for this brand?
We have opened one combined store, which is Trenery and Country Road in the waterfront in Cape Town, highly successful. And we're putting the same format into the Woolworths Hyde Park store in Johannesburg in 2 months' time. We think there's scope for another 8 or 10 of those around the country.
Costs going forward, we have rising electricity costs. We're going to find out next week whether Eskom's allowed the 35% a year tariff for the next 3 years. What would that do to your costs at Woolworths?
Electricity costs is currently a small part of our cost base, but if those increases go through, it'll become a more significant part of our cost base, and it'll, as everybody knows, add generally to inflation and pressure in the economy. We've done an enormous amount of work in Woolworths to see what we can do to reduce electricity costs, and it's a key part of what we call our good business journey, which is to reduce energy costs. And what started out as an environmental drive is now becoming a pretty hard-nosed business drive. And there are ways we can reduce that impact, but it will be a big impact.